If you're a fan of the Old West, especially of its outlaws, you've probably seen the photo you are looking at right now. A masked outlaw lying dead after being killed by a posse. His name was William Whitney Brazelton, better known as Brazen Bill. He was a fearless stagecoach robber who prowled Arizona and New Mexico, often striking alone and armed in unusual fashion. Known for 9 daring holdups and a brief stint as a Prescott confidence man, he was described as a big, good-natured fellow, except when on business. Newspapers like John Clum's praised his gun skill and nerve, calling him a man with not a streak of yellow in him. Well, let's get into it, shall we? My name's Steven, and welcome to Wild West Deep Dives. William Brazelton's origins are murky, wrapped in the same half-truths and bravado that would define his later life. He claimed Missouri as his birthplace, though some reports place his beginnings in San Francisco. Wherever the truth lies, it's agreed that he was orphaned early and left to defend for himself on the unforgiving streets of the Barbary Coast in San Francisco, one of the roughest neighborhoods in 19th century America. There, the boy learned to survive by cunning and cruelty, making a home out of the rusted shell of an old ship's boiler, and falling in with the gangs and gamblers who ruled the wharfs. By age 15, he had already killed a man in a brawl, an act that marked the start of a lifetime spent on the edge of the law. When Brazelton resurfaced in Arizona years later, he had reinvented himself as a showman and confidence man. In 1876, he arrived in Prescott, claiming he would stage a performance unlike any other, one in which he would swallow a wagon wheel. The sheer absurdity of the act drew a crowd, and on the day of the event, the house was packed. The towering 6-foot, 200-pound man collected his admission fees himself, assuring the audience that his troupe was preparing backstage. As excitement turned to impatience, he excused himself for final preparations, then vanished. The audience, realizing that they had been conned, laughed it off rather than rioted, dubbing him the man who swallowed a wagon wheel. It was a fitting title for a man whose appetite for risk and knack for deception would soon make him one of the most brazen outlaws in the Southwest, earning the nickname Brazen Bill. Brazelton's first known stagecoach robbery occurred on the 28th of April, 1877, between Socorro and Las Lunas, New Mexico, when a coach was relieved of 3 gold bars and a box of silver. Masked and armed, he forced the driver and passengers to surrender their valuables before disappearing into the desert. Later that same year, he surfaced in Tucson, Arizona, living quietly as a hay and grain hauler while secretly planning the bold robberies that would soon make him infamous. It's believed that Brazen Bill robbed as many as 9 stagecoaches during his short but violent career. While not all of these holdups can be verified, 4 stand out as the most documented and credible, each revealing the daring methods and growing recklessness of one of Arizona's most notorious lone highwaymen. First, we have the Wickenburg robbery, 27th of September, 1877. It took place 12 miles north of Wickenburg, Arizona. Disguised in old laborer's clothes and a black gauze mask, he halted the California and Arizona stage at gunpoint. Forcing the driver to unhitch the horses, Brazelton made 2 passengers open the Wells Fargo Express box and mail sacks. After emptying the contents, he demolished the box, ordered the empty sacks tossed back inside, and vanished into the desert dusk. His haul was considerable: $600 from a registered package, $1,300 in gold coins and dust, $470 in cash, and roughly $250 in miscellaneous valuables, making the total haul of roughly $85,000 today. Newspapers, including the Arizona Citizen, placed Wells Fargo's losses at about $1,900 and offered a $300 reward for each robber arrested, though investigators would soon discover there was only one. Next was the Cooks Canyon robbery on the 28th of May, 1878. A stagecoach out of Silver City, New Mexico was stopped in Cooks Canyon. This time, the take was much smaller, just $26 in registered mail, an old silver watch, and $13 from the passengers and driver. Though meager by comparison, the robbery confirmed Brazelton's pattern: single-handed, masked, and methodical. He struck remote desert routes where the law's reach was thin and the desert was his ally. Next, The first Point of Mountain robbery took place on the 31st of July, 1878, on a warm July evening. By midsummer of 1878, William Brazen Bill Brazelton had perfected his craft as a lone stage robber. The westbound stage from Tucson to Florence rattled slowly through a stretch of deep sand near a rugged outcrop known as Point of Mountain, today near Marana, Arizona. Among the passengers that evening was John P. Clum, the former Indian agent, who would later found the Tombstone Epitaph and famously captured Geronimo. Riding with him were a veterinary surgeon from Fort Lowell, armed with 2 revolvers, and a Chinese passenger seated beside the driver, Arthur Hill. The journey was uneventful until a sudden shout brought the team to a halt. A .50 caliber Spanish carbine appeared in the stage doorway, the hammer cocked back with a loud metallic click. Behind it stood a tall, powerfully built man wearing a slouch hat and a rough disguise. His coat turned inside out, his pants crudely patched with burlap, and his face hidden behind a mask of white cloth.
"Up with him quick, or I'll kill you deader than hell,"
the outlaw barked.
"If any of you fellers want to fight, you can start shooting now. You might get me, but I'll get some of you first."
No one dared to test them. The passengers raised their hands as Brazelton ordered Hill to throw down the Wells Fargo Express box and the mail pouches. Once on the ground, he rifled through them only to find them empty of treasure. Undeterred, he took what he could, $37 in cash and a pair of earrings from the passengers, then sent the stage on its way. Clum later recalled the bandit's distinctive fighting posture, gripping a pistol against the barrel of his rifle, ready to fire either weapon in a heartbeat. It was a strange, almost theatrical stance that became part of his legend. The masked robber vanished into the desert shrub as quickly as he had appeared, leaving behind shaken travelers and one of the most vivid eyewitness accounts of an Old West holdup ever recorded. The Tucson papers buzzed the next morning with news of the daring lone highwayman, the Knight of the Road as some called him, had struck within 18 miles of town under full daylight against armed passengers and gotten away clean. It would not be the last time Point of Mountain echoed with his voice. Well, here we are again. The second Point of Mountain robbery on the 15th of August, 1878. 2 weeks after the July holdup, the Tucson-Florence stage rolled into the same standing notch at Point of Mountain with driver Arthur Hill on the box and passenger John Miller beside him. As they neared the exact bend, Miller asked Hill to point out where the last robbery had taken place. Hill nodded toward a scrubby bush, only for the same masked highwayman to spring from behind it and bark,
"Yes, here I am. Throw up your hands."
The scene played like a grim joke. As before, the outlaw halted the team, made them toss down the mail sacks and express box, then turned to the passengers. This time the take was between $226 and $234 from Miller's pocketbook, and roughly $8 from the man inside. With the loot in hand, the robber melted into the brush. A posse rode out that evening, even exchanging words with a lone horseman on the road, but inexplicably let him pass. At first light, trackers cut the sign from the ambush site and followed it straight back to the spot where that lone rider had been met. No arrest followed, but the message was unmistakable. Brazelton was bold enough to strike the same coach at the same place and confident enough to taunt his pursuers while he did it. By mid-August, the people of Tucson had had enough. For nearly a year, a lone highwayman had haunted the desert roads, robbing stages, taunting posses, and vanishing into the mesquite. Each new holdup only made him bolder. When the same man robbed the same stage at the same spot twice in 2 weeks, Sheriff Charles Shibell knew the territory's reputation was on the line. It was a single horseshoe that finally turned the tide. One of the outlaw's mounts had thrown a shoe near the Point of Mountain robbery, leaving behind a twisted, unmistakable imprint. The trail led south toward Tucson, and straight to a small ranch owned by a young man named David Nemitz. Shibell and his men found Nemitz nervous, jumpy, and quick to talk once he realized what he was caught up in. He confessed that he provided horses and supplies for the bandit out of fear, and warned the sheriff that the man he knew as Brazelton would never be taken alive unless by artful strategy. That strategy came together on the night of the 22nd of August. The posse saddled up under a thin desert moon and followed the tracks down the Santa Cruz River. The trail wound into a thick Mesquite Bosque about 3 miles south of Tucson, quiet, tangled, and dark as pitch. The men dismounted, moving in silence. The smell of horses and dusk thickened the air. Somewhere ahead, they caught the faint clink of metal, Brazelton tending to his gear. When they finally spotted him, he was standing beside his horse, rifle slung at his side, pistols on his hips, his mask dangling from his hand. Shibell called out for him to surrender. For a heartbeat, the desert held its breath. Then Brazelton reached for his gun. 7 Winchesters answered. The reports echoed down the river wash, the smoke curling into the mesquite. When the dust settled, the most feared lone highwayman in Arizona lay dead, muttering something that might have been a curse or maybe a prayer. The posse found him bristling with weapons, 2 cartridge belts, 2 pistols, a Remington rolling block rifle, the black gauze mask that had terrified passengers for months, a gold watch, and the earrings taken in his Point of Mountain holdup. They strapped his body across a horse and rode back to Tucson under the early dawn. By morning, word had spread. Governor John Hoyt received a telegram from Tucson stating, quote, "Sheriff Shibell and posse killed William Brazelton last night in an attempt to arrest him." Brazelton, it seems, is a desperate character who single-handed has been taking the United States mail in different places in the territory. At the courthouse, the outlaw's body was propped upright in a chair for all to see. Photographed twice, first masked, then unmasked. His face was swollen, his frame massive even in death, his hands still calloused from the reins and the gun. Crowds came to stare. Some cursed him, some whispered prayers, and others simply marveled that one man could hold a territory in fear for so long. The Arizona Citizen called him a hoodlum graduate, a San Francisco drifter who once lived in an old boiler on the Barbary Coast and dreamed of robbing banks as far as Santa Fe. One reporter joked that he was the most desperate-looking character you can imagine. Armed to the teeth won't express it. He was armed to his eyelashes and lived just above that other fellow on the headwaters of Bitter Creek. Trivia for y'all. Who do you think that was? In time, the place where he fell became a haunted stretch of road. Locals claimed they saw a masked figure on horseback drifting through the mesquite at night. The ghost of El Tejano, as they called him. Whether it was the spirit of Brazelton or just the desert wind, no one could say. But one thing was certain, the reign of Brazen Bill had ended in a blaze of gunfire, and the legend of America's most brazen outlaw had just begun. Though Brazen Bill's career was brief, his legend endured. His death photo, posed upright with his rifle and mask, became an enduring image of frontier justice. Locals swore his ghost, El Tejano, haunted the Santa Cruz where he fell, and newspapers cast him as a fearless lone bandit of Arizona lore. Even in death, Brazen Bill remained larger than life. I hope y'all enjoyed this episode on William Brazen Bill Brazelton. If you did, please give a like and maybe leave a comment down below. I love hearing from y'all. Join the membership team. For just $1, you'll get access to bonus content like the first stagecoach robbery in US history. We will see y'all next time, and remember, when in doubt, shoot straight, shoot fast. God bless.